The hum of the vacuum was the kind of noise you stop hearing after the first 10 minutes. My hands were on autopilot. Pull the cord, run it under the bed, around the chair legs, the same pattern I'd done 1,000 times. Room 1904 smelled faintly of expensive cologne, the kind I couldn't name but could always recognize. The scent clung to the curtains, to the air, to the tiny gold pen left on the desk by whoever had stayed here last night. The Hilton Grand was never quiet. Not in the hallways, not in the lobby, not even in the staff elevator where the walls seemed to vibrate from the energy of people rushing to be somewhere. But up here on the 19th floor, there was a kind of stillness. It was the stillness of money, the kind that bought you the right to shut out the noise. I had just straightened the last pillow when the phone on the nightstand rang. Not my phone. The room phone. I froze, one hand still pressing the edge of the duvet. Guests almost never called room to room in this hotel unless something was wrong. But something about the way it rang, insistent, sharp, made me reach for it without thinking. Room 1904, I said softly. What came next made my heart stutter. The voice on the other end spoke in rapid Dutch, and without pausing, without thinking, my tongue obeyed an instinct buried deep in me. I replied, fluently, effortlessly. Words I hadn't spoken aloud in years tumbled out as if they had been waiting for this moment. I glanced toward the open door of the room, my mind already, trying to push me back into silence, but it was too late. The conversation continued. Instructions, numbers, something about a meeting time. I gave short confirmations in Dutch, my voice low, my eyes fixed on the patterned carpet. When I hung up, the air in the room felt heavier, and that's when I saw him. He was standing in the doorway, leaning against the frame like he'd been there a while, tall, maybe late 50s, skin pale against the dark navy of his suit. But it wasn't his posture or his clothing that unsettled me. It was his eyes, sharp, focused, like he had just heard something that changed the way he saw me. "You speak Dutch," he said, not a question. I swallowed. "Just a little," I lied. His smile was faint, almost private, the kind people wear when they know something you don't. That was not a little. I didn't know his name, but I knew the type. Guests who stayed in the penthouse suites, who had their luggage handled by managers instead of bellboys, who never looked twice at the people cleaning their rooms. Except he was looking. Before I could speak again, he stepped into the room. "Do you know who you were talking to just now?" "No," I said quickly, wishing I could rewind the last 2 minutes. "It was just someone called the wrong room, I think." His gaze stayed on me, unblinking. "That was my associate." My stomach tightened. I was in the room next door. I heard the phone ring. Then I heard, "You." His eyes narrowed slightly. "And I think you just understood something you weren't supposed to." I gripped the vacuum handle like it might anchor me. "I didn't—" "Relax," he interrupted, his tone shifting, softening. "I'm not angry, I'm intrigued." That word made me uneasy. "I don't meet many people who can speak that language here," he went on. "Especially not—" His voice trailed off, and I could almost feel the weight of the unspoken words. "Especially not someone like you, a hotel maid, a black woman in a crisp regulation uniform, standing in a room that would never be mine." I straightened, forcing my voice steady. "I should get back to work." "I'd like to see you later," he said simply. I blinked. "See me?" He nodded. "For a conversation. Off the clock. Dinner, maybe." The offer hung in the air between us, dangerous in ways I couldn't yet define. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just gathered the vacuum cord in quick, practiced motions and left the room before the silence swallowed me whole. That night, I couldn't sleep. His words replayed in my head, tangled up with memories I'd locked away. Dutch wasn't just a language to me. It was a thread tied to another life, one that ended the day I left Rotterdam under circumstances I still couldn't say out loud without my throat tightening. I hadn't spoken it since, until today. The next day, he found me. I was wiping down, the brass railing in the lobby, when his shadow stretched across the marble floor beside me. "Lunch," he said, like it was already decided. I hesitated, glancing toward the front desk where Marisol, the receptionist, was watching with raised eyebrows. Staff weren't supposed to socialize with guests, but something in his expression told me this wasn't a casual invitation. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We sat in the corner of a quiet restaurant 3 blocks from the hotel. He introduced himself as Alexander Voss, a Dutch-born businessman with property interests in 6 countries. His voice carried the smooth confidence of someone used to being listened to. "I heard you translate that call perfectly," he said between sips of wine. "You have no accent. How does a hotel maid in New York come to speak my mother tongue so well?" I picked at my salad, buying time. "I used to live there, a long time ago." "Rotterdam," he guessed. My eyes flicked up to his. "Amsterdam, actually." "Why did you leave?" he asked, like he had every right to know. "That's a long story," I said, my voice low. "I have time." But I didn't answer. Instead, he told me about his company, about a deal in the works, something delicate, something that required trust. "And now," he said, "I'm wondering if you might be able to help me." That's where things began to shift. He brought me into rooms I'd never imagined I'd see. Conference suites high above the city. Meetings with men in tailored suits who didn't look at me until I spoke in flawless Dutch and their eyes widened. The hotel staff whispered about it. Some thought I was having an affair with him. Others thought I'd stumbled into blackmail material. They didn't know the truth. I was translating for him. Just for a few days, he said. Just until the deal closed. But each day pulled me deeper into a world I didn't belong to. A world that remembered me in ways I wished it wouldn't. Because one night after a particularly tense meeting, I heard a name I knew, a name from my past, and that was when I realized he wasn't the only one who had recognized me. He looked at me across the table, not like a man who'd found a useful translator, but like a man who'd found something he'd been missing without knowing it. "There's one more thing," Alexander said quietly. "The call you answered, it wasn't accidental. It was a test. My partner wanted to see who would keep calm, who would speak when it mattered. You passed." The words hit me like a cold wind. I wanted to be incandescent with fury. For the way they'd watched me, for the small ways power tries to prove the world still belongs to it. And part of me was. But there was another current under that anger. The strange, sinking gratitude of having been seen at all. To be noticed without being spoken down to felt like a wound stitched the wrong way. It hurt, and it held. He offered me a place beside him, not as a maid, not as a curiosity, but as someone who could move between rooms and languages and make sure the promises they made became something other than paper. It came with travel, with money, with an invitation to stop being small. I pictured my mother's hands stirring a pot, heard again the little metronome of her wooden spoon. "Tighten your back, not your heart," she'd said. I thought of the note shoved under my door and of Marisol's raised eyebrows and Sophia's steady hand on my arm. I said yes, and I said no, both at once. I accepted the work. The bridge building, the translations, the careful, slow tending of promises. But I refused to let it erase what had kept me human. The kitchen laughter, the city roots, the small rituals that made me who I was. I would travel and come home. I would sign contracts and still buy cocoa bread from the bakery on De Nieuwe Ooster. I would be seen, but not swallowed. Some doors close and some doors open. The grief is that you can never quite tell which will be which until you step through. I stepped. The world didn't instantly bloom into certainty. There were awkward meetings and small betrayals and nights I lay awake wondering if the choice had cost me more than I'd been ready to give. There were also rooms where an auntie hugged me like family, and a boy wrote to say that hearing my story made him less afraid to speak. That is the shape of my life now, both bruise and bloom. When the phone rings these days, I answer. Not because I am ready for everything, but because I have learned the language of being found, how to take the light without letting it blind me, how to carry my past like a recipe that flavors whatever I make next. I answer in Dutch first, the door I stepped through, and then in whatever language the person on the other end needs most. And if they ask to see me, I go. I go with my back tightened and my heart held open, and I carry, like always, the small rhythm of my mother's spoon. Taste it again.